Luca Mancini's hand froze on the back entrance door handle of Bellot, his upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago. Through the crack in the door, he could hear George Anderson's voice cutting through the kitchen noise like a blade. Listen here, Ka. I don't care what sob story you're spinning about your sick grandmother. You people always have some excuse when you mess up orders. Maybe if you spent less time on your phone and more time actually working, you wouldn't be such a disappointment. Luca's jaw clenched. He had come to do a surprise inspection of his restaurant, something he did monthly to ensure quality. But this was not what he expected to find. Through the small window, he could see Kala Evans, one of his waitresses, standing with her shoulders straight despite the verbal assault. Her beautiful dark skin seemed to glow under the harsh kitchen lights, and her natural curls were pulled back in a neat bun. She wore the restaurant's black uniform with dignity, even as Anderson continued his tirade. And another thing, Anderson sneered, stepping closer to Ka in an intimidating manner. I've been getting complaints about your attitude. Customers don't want to be served by someone who looks like they'd rather be anywhere else. Maybe you should consider finding work somewhere more suitable for your kind. Luca's blood turned to ice. In that moment, watching this beautiful, strong woman being degraded in his restaurant by his manager, something primal awakened in him. Nobody, absolutely nobody, disrespected his people. And somehow, without even knowing her story, Ka Evans had just become his people. The dawn of the Mancini family was about to remind everyone exactly who owned this establishment. If you want to see how this powerful mafia boss handles this situation and what happens when he steps out of the shadows to protect Ka, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more stories like this one to life. 3 hours earlier, Kala Evans had started her shift at Bellanote with hope in her heart. She needed this job desperately. Her grandmother's medical bills were mounting, and her little brother Marcus needed new school supplies. At 24, she was the sole provider for her family after their parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. Bellanote was the most prestigious restaurant in downtown Chicago, known for its authentic Italian cuisine and elegant atmosphere. The tips were good, and usually the work environment was professional. Usually, everything changed when George Anderson became the day manager 3 weeks ago. From day one, he had made it clear that he didn't think Ka belonged there. His comments started small, questioning her competence, making snide remarks about her appearance, always finding fault with her work, even when other staff members praised her efficiency and warm customer service. Ka, Table 7 is asking for you specifically, said Julia, another waitress, as she passed by with a tray of appetizers. The elderly Italian couple. They said you made their anniversary dinner perfect last week. Ka smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she loved her job, the connections she made with customers, the way she could make someone's day special, with attentive service and genuine care. She had always been good with people, speaking 3 languages fluently and having an intuitive understanding of what customers needed. As she approached Table 7, she recognized Mr. and Mrs. Bruno, a sweet couple in their 70s who came in monthly to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Mrs. Bruno's face lit up when she saw Ka approaching. Bella ragata, Mrs. Bruno exclaimed, using the Italian phrase for beautiful girl. We specifically requested you. You made our last visit so special. It's wonderful to see you both again, Ka replied warmly, her genuine smile making her dark eyes sparkle. Are we celebrating another month of love today? 52 years tomorrow, Mr. Bruno said proudly, reaching across to squeeze his wife's hand. And we want the same table, the same wine, and the same perfect service you gave us last time. As Ka took their order, she noticed George Anderson watching her from across the dining room. His expression was cold, calculating. She had learned to recognize that look. It meant trouble was coming. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us as we continue bringing these stories to life. She finished serving the Bruno and was heading back to the kitchen when Anderson intercepted her path. Evans, my office now. Her stomach dropped, but she followed him to the small manager's office behind the kitchen. Anderson closed the door and turned to face her, his pale face flushed with what looked like barely contained anger. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're special, don't you? Getting requested by customers, speaking your little foreign languages, acting like you own this place." "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Anderson," Ka replied carefully, keeping her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. "Your job is to serve food and keep your mouth shut, not to get cozy with customers like you're part of their family. This is a high-end establishment, not some neighborhood diner where you can be all friendly and casual." Ka felt her temper flare, but forced herself to remain calm. "The customers seem to appreciate personal service. My reviews have been consistently excellent." Anderson's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me. I know your type. You think you can charm your way through life, but this isn't the kind of place where that works. Maybe you should consider finding employment somewhere more appropriate." The implication in his words was clear, and Ka felt a familiar ache in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times throughout her life when people made assumptions about her based on the color of her skin. "I've never had any complaints about my work," she said firmly, finding her strength. "In fact, I've received several commendations from the previous management." "Well, I'm the management now," Anderson snapped. "And I'm telling you to tone it down. Stop trying to be everyone's friend and just do your job." Quietly. Before Ka could respond, there was a knock on the office door. Anderson yanked it open to find Julia standing there looking nervous. "Sorry to interrupt, but Table 7 is asking for Ka again. They want to speak with her about arranging a private party for their anniversary." Anderson's face turned red. "Tell them she's busy. Someone else can handle it." "But they specifically asked for I don't care what they asked for," Anderson exploded, his voice carrying into the kitchen. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You people always think the rules don't apply to you." The kitchen fell silent. Several staff members turned to stare, and Ka felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. Anderson had just humiliated her in front of her coworkers, and his choice of words, "you people," left no doubt about his meaning. What none of them knew was that Luca Mancini had just entered through the back door and was listening to every word. Luca remained in the shadows of the back hallway, his fury building with each word that came out of Anderson's mouth. As the head of the Mancini crime family, he was used to dealing with disrespect, usually with swift and permanent consequences. But this was different. This wasn't about business or territory or power. This was about basic human dignity. And watching Anderson degrade Kaya was igniting something protective and primal in his chest. He studied Ka through the kitchen service window. Even under Anderson's verbal assault, she held herself with grace and dignity. Her posture was straight, her chin lifted, and though he could see the hurt in her dark eyes, she wasn't backing down. There was strength in her that called to something deep in his soul. Luca had built his empire on respect and loyalty. His restaurants, his legitimate businesses, were supposed to be safe havens where people were treated with dignity. The fact that this was happening under his own roof in his own establishment was unacceptable. "You know what your problem is, Evans?" Anderson continued, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. "You think because you can speak a little Italian and smile pretty, you're better than what you are. But at the end of the day, you're just help, and help should know their place." That was the final straw. Lucas stepped out of the shadows and walked into the kitchen with the quiet confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. The kitchen staff immediately noticed him. His presence was impossible to ignore. At 6 feet 3 inches, with broad shoulders, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, he commanded attention without saying a word. "Good afternoon," he said calmly, his voice carrying just enough authority to make everyone freeze. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Anderson spun around, his face going pale as he took in Luca's appearance. Something about the man's bearing, the way he carried himself, the expensive cut of his clothes screamed danger and power. "I'm sorry, sir, but the kitchen is employees only," Anderson stammered, trying to regain his composure. "If you're looking for the dining room, I'm exactly where I need to be," Luca interrupted smoothly. His dark eyes swept the kitchen before settling on Ka. Up close, she was even more beautiful than he'd thought. Her skin was a rich, warm brown that seemed to glow under the lights, and her eyes held intelligence and strength despite the situation she'd just endured. "You must be Ka Evans," he said, his voice gentling as he addressed her directly. "I've heard excellent things about your work." Kala blinked in surprise. She had no idea who this man was, but something about his presence made the entire atmosphere in the kitchen shift. Anderson, who had been so aggressive moments before, now looked nervous and uncertain. "I'm sorry, sir, but who are you?" Anderson demanded, trying to reassert his authority. Luca turned his attention back to the manager, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'm Luca Mancini. I own this restaurant." The silence that followed was deafening. Anderson's face went from pale to ashen as the implications hit him. The kitchen staff exchanged glances, and Ka felt her heart skip a beat. The owner. She had just witnessed her manager humiliating her in front of the actual owner of the restaurant. "Mr. Mancini," Anderson began, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know you were coming in today. I was just handling a personnel issue." "Is that what you call it?" Luca's voice was deadly quiet, because from where I was standing, it sounded like harassment.
"No, sir."
"You misunderstood. I was simply giving feedback about professional standards." "Professional standards?" Luca stepped closer to Anderson, and the manager instinctively backed up. "Let me tell you about professional standards, Anderson. Professional standards mean treating every employee with respect. Professional standards mean recognizing talent and dedication.
"When you see it."
Professional standards mean never ever using language that demeans someone based on their race." Anderson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I never said anything about race." "You people," Luca quoted back at him, "know their place? More appropriate?" His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath that made everyone in the kitchen hold their breath. "Did you think I was deaf, Anderson?" Ka watched this exchange with growing amazement. This powerful, intimidating man was defending her. She could see the barely controlled anger in his dark eyes, the way his hands were clenched at his sides, and she realized that Luca Mancini was furious on her behalf. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Anderson tried again. "The only misunderstanding here is how you got the impression that this behavior would be tolerated in my establishment." Luca's voice cut through Anderson's excuses like a blade. "Miss Evans, would you please join me in the dining room? I'd like to speak with you privately." Ka nodded, still stunned by the turn of events. As she moved to follow Luca, Anderson grabbed her arm. "And now wait just a minute." Luca's hand shot out and gripped Anderson's wrist with enough force to make the man wheeze and immediately release Ka. "Touch her again," Luca said in a voice so quiet and dangerous that it made the hair on the back of Ka's neck stand up. "And you'll discover exactly why people in this city know better than to cross the Mancini family." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Anderson's face went white as the full implications of who he was dealing with became clear. The Castellaniano name carried weight in Chicago. Everyone knew they were connected, powerful, and not people you wanted as enemies. Luca released Anderson's wrist and turned to Ka, his expression immediately softening. "Shall we?" As they walked toward the dining room, Ka could feel every eye in the kitchen following them. Her mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. The owner of the restaurant, who was apparently connected to one of Chicago's most powerful families, had just defended her against Anderson's racism and was now asking to speak with her privately. She had no idea what came next, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like someone was on her side. Luca led Ka to a quiet corner table in the dining room away from the lunch crowd. He pulled out her chair with old-world courtesy, waiting until she was seated before taking his own seat across from her. Up close, she could see the details that marked him as dangerous. The scar along his left temple, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, the expensive watch that probably cost more than she made in a year. "First," he said, his voice gentle but serious, "I want to apologize. What you experienced today should never happen in any workplace, but especially not in one of my establishments." Anderson's behavior was completely unacceptable. Ka found her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "Thank you for stepping in. I wasn't sure how to handle the situation. You handled it with more grace than he deserved, Luca replied, and she could see genuine admiration in his dark eyes. I've been watching you work. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, seeing her expression. I do surprise inspections of all my businesses. Your customer service is exceptional. The way you interact with guests, your attention to detail, your professionalism, it's exactly what this restaurant should represent. Warmth spread through Ka's chest at his words. After weeks of Anderson's constant criticism, hearing genuine praise felt like water in a desert. I love this job, she said honestly. The customers, the atmosphere, the chance to make someone's day special. It's what I'm good at. It shows. Luca leaned forward slightly, his attention completely focused on her.
Tell me about yourself, Ka.
What brought you to Bella? Something about his tone, the way he said her name, made her feel safe enough to open up. I'm supporting my family, my grandmother, and my little brother. Our parents died 2 years ago, and I'm all they have left. She saw something shift in Luca's expression, a flash of understanding, of shared pain. I'm sorry for your loss. That's a heavy responsibility for someone so young. I'm 24, she said, lifting her chin slightly.
And I can handle it.
I just need the opportunity to work without being harassed. You'll have it, Lucas said firmly. Anderson won't be a problem anymore. Before Ka could ask what he meant, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her heart sink. It was from her grandmother's nurse. I'm sorry, she said, looking up at Luca with worry in her eyes. My grandmother is in the hospital. I need to go, Lucas said immediately, standing up. Family comes first, always, but my shift is covered. Don't worry about anything here. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. This is my personal number. If you need anything, anything at all, you call me. Ka took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. Mr. Mancini, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. His voice was firm but kind, and call me Luca. As Ka hurried to gather her things, she didn't see the way Luca's expression hardened as he watched Anderson through the kitchen window. The manager was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated, probably trying to figure out how to spin the situation in his favor. Luca had built his reputation on loyalty and respect. People who worked for him were under his protection, and anyone who threatened that protection faced consequences. Anderson had just made a very dangerous enemy. 20 minutes later, Kala was sitting in the hospital waiting room holding her grandmother's frail hand. Grandma Rose had raised her after their parents died. And at 78, she was the strongest woman Ka knew. But diabetes and heart problems were taking their toll. How's work, baby? Grandma Rose asked weakly.
It's fine, Grandma. Don't worry about that.
Just focus on getting better. That boy Marcus called, said he needs money for a school trip. I told him we'd figure it out. Ka's heart clenched. Marcus was only 16, and she was determined to give him every opportunity their parents would have wanted him to have. But between the medical bills, rent, and daily expenses, money was always tight. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. How is your grandmother? If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Luca.
She stared at the message, surprised by the thoughtfulness. In her experience, bosses didn't usually check on employees' personal emergencies. But then again, Luca Mancini wasn't like any boss she'd ever had. She texted back, she's stable.
Thank you for asking.
I should be able to work tomorrow. His response came quickly. Take all the time you need. Your job will be waiting. Meanwhile, back at Bellanote, Luca was having a very different conversation with George Anderson. They were in the manager's office, door closed, and Anderson was sweating despite the air conditioning. Mr. Mancini, I want you to know that I have the utmost respect for all our employees. Stop talking, Luca said quietly, and Anderson's mouth snapped shut. I'm going to explain something to you very clearly, and I want you to listen carefully. Luca stood up and walked around the desk, his presence filling the small office. Kala Evans is under my personal protection now. That means if she experiences any further harassment, discrimination, or retaliation of any kind, I will hold you personally responsible. Anderson's face was pale. Of course, sir. I understand completely. I don't think you do. Luca's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. The Mancini family has a reputation in this city. We protect what's ours, and as of today, Kaya is ours. The implications hung heavy in the air. Anderson knew exactly what kind of family he was dealing with, and the threat was crystal clear. Furthermore, Luca continued, you will treat every employee in this restaurant with respect and professionalism. Any complaints about discrimination or harassment will come directly to me. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Absolutely clear.
Good.
Luca straightened his tie and headed for the door. Oh, and Anderson, if I hear about any rumors or gossip regarding this conversation or Ms. Evans's employment, you'll find yourself looking for work in a city very far from Chicago permanently. As Luca left the restaurant, he couldn't stop thinking about Ka, her strength in the face of Anderson's abuse, the way she'd spoken about her family, the brief moment when their hands had touched. Something about her had awakened a protective instinct he never felt before, and he was determined to make sure she never faced that kind of treatment again. What he didn't expect was how much he was already looking forward to seeing her again. 2 days later, Ka returned to work with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Her grandmother was stable and back home, but the medical bills had added another layer of financial stress. She needed this job more than ever, but she wasn't sure what kind of reception she'd receive after the incident with Anderson. She was surprised to find that Anderson was nowhere to be seen during her shift. When she asked Julie about it, the other waitress just shrugged. He called in sick yesterday and today, probably embarrassed about what happened with the owner. Ka spent the day working with a sense of relief she hadn't felt in weeks. Without Anderson's constant criticism and hostile presence, she was able to focus on what she did best, providing excellent service and making customers feel welcome. It was during the dinner rush that she saw him again. Luca Mancini walked into the dining room like he owned the place, which she reminded herself he did. He was dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, this one navy blue, and he moved with the same quiet confidence that had impressed her before. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and he smiled, a real warm smile that made her heart skip a beat. He was seated at a table in her section, and she took a moment to compose herself before approaching. Good evening, Mr. Mancini, she said professionally, though she couldn't quite hide the warmth in her voice. Luca, he corrected gently. How is your grandmother? Much better, thank you. She's home and resting. I'm glad to hear it. He studied her face carefully. And how are you really? The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked how she was and actually wanted to hear the answer? I'm okay, she said, then found herself being more honest. Better than I've been in weeks, actually. It's nice to work without feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. Something dark flashed in Luca's eyes. You'll never have to feel that way here again. I promise you that. The intensity in his voice made her believe him completely. There was something about Luca Mancini that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't experienced since her parents died. Can I get you something to drink? She asked, trying to return to professional ground. Actually, he said, glancing around the busy restaurant. I was hoping you might join me for a few minutes when your shift ends. If you're comfortable with that. Ka hesitated. Everything about this situation was unusual. The owner of the restaurant asking to spend time with her, the way he looked at her like she was someone important, the protective way he'd handled Anderson. But there was something about Luca that made her want to say yes. I get off at 9 o'clock, she said. Perfect. I'll wait. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Ka found herself glancing toward Luca's table throughout the evening, and each time she caught him watching her work with an expression of admiration and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. At 9 o'clock sharp, she finished her closing duties and found Luca waiting by the front entrance. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, making him look slightly less intimidating, but no less attractive. There's a cafe down the street that stays open late, he said. Would you like to get some coffee? They walked the 3 blocks in comfortable conversation, and Ka was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. Luca asked thoughtful questions about her family, her goals, her interests, and he listened to her answers with genuine attention. The cafe was small and cozy with dim lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. They found a corner table and Luca ordered coffee for both of them. Can I ask you something? Ka said, wrapping her hands around her warm mug. Anything? Why did you step in the other day? I mean, I'm grateful, but you don't even know me. Luca was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. My father taught me that how you treat people who can't fight back says everything about who you are as a person. Anderson was abusing his power, and you were handling it with more dignity than he deserved. It wasn't the first time, Ka admitted. He'd been making comments for weeks. I needed the job too much to make waves. You shouldn't have to tolerate that from anyone. Luca's voice carried an edge of anger. No one should. Is that why Anderson hasn't been at work? Luca's expression became carefully neutral. Anderson and I had a conversation about appropriate workplace behavior. I think he understood my expectations. Something in his tone made Ka suspect there was more to that conversation than he was letting on. But she didn't press. Instead, she found herself studying his face, the strong jawline, the intelligent dark eyes, the way his mouth curved when he was thinking.
What about you? She asked.
What made you want to own restaurants? Family business, he said simply. My father believed in having legitimate enterprises alongside other interests. The restaurants give me a chance to create something positive, places where people can come together and feel welcome. Other interests? Luca met her eyes directly. I think you're smart enough to know that the Mancini family has interests beyond the restaurant business. The honesty in his statement should have scared her. She was sitting across from a man who had just essentially admitted to being involved in organized crime. But instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of trust. Whatever else Luca Mancini might be, he had protected her when she needed it most. Does that frighten you? He asked quietly. Ka considered the question seriously. It should, she said finally, but you've shown me more respect and kindness in 3 days than most people do in months. So no, it doesn't frighten me. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Surprise, gratitude, and something warmer that made her breath catch. You're remarkable, he said softly. Do you know that? Before Ka could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus' number, and she felt a familiar spike of worry.
I'm sorry. I need to take this. It's my brother, Ka.
Marcus' voice was tight with anxiety. I'm at the police station. I didn't do anything wrong, I swear, but they're saying I was with some guys who were shoplifting. And slow down, Ka said, her heart racing. Which police station are you? Okay. Luca was watching her with concern. And when she hung up the phone, he immediately leaned forward. What's wrong? My brother's been arrested. It's probably a misunderstanding, but I need to go get him. She started to stand up, her mind racing through logistics. Bail money she didn't have. A lawyer she couldn't afford. I'll drive you, Luca said, already standing. You don't have to, Ka. His voice was firm, but gentle. Let me help. 20 minutes later, they were walking into the police station, and Ka was amazed by how quickly things moved once Luca introduced himself. Doors opened, conversations happened in hushed tones, and within an hour, Marcus was released with all charges dropped. As they drove home, Marcus kept glancing between Ka and Luca with curiosity and weariness. So, you're my sister's boss, he asked from the back seat of Luca's expensive car. I am, Luca replied. And you must be the brother she's so proud of. Marcus looked surprised. She talks about me constantly. She says you're the smartest person she knows. Ka felt her heart warm at the easy way Luca interacted with Marcus, treating him with respect and genuine interest. When they reached their small apartment building, Luca walked them to the door. Thank you, Kala said, meaning it more than she could express. For everything tonight. You don't need to thank me. Luca's eyes were soft in the dim light. Take care of yourself, Ka. I'll see you at work. As she watched him drive away, Ka realized that everything in her life had just changed. Luca Mancini was dangerous, powerful, and completely out of her league. But he was also kind, protective, and looking at her like she was something precious. For the first time in years, she felt like someone was truly on her side. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt almost too good to be true. Anderson had mysteriously resigned, citing personal reasons. And the new manager, Sofia Reyes, was professional, fair, and actually seemed to value Ka's contributions to the restaurant. More importantly, Luca had become a regular presence in her life. He stopped by the restaurant several times a week, always finding reasons to check on operations that somehow required speaking with Ka. Their conversations grew longer and more personal, and she found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. It was a Thursday evening when everything came to a head. Ka was finishing her shift when she noticed a man at the bar who had been watching her all night. He was well dressed, but had an edge to him that made her uncomfortable. And when she passed by his table, he grabbed her wrist. Hey, beautiful. How about you and me go somewhere private when you get off work? I'm sorry, but I'm not interested, Ka said firmly, trying to pull away. His grip tightened. Come on, don't be like that. I tipped very well for good service. The implication in his words made her skin crawl, and she was about to call for help when a familiar voice cut through the noise of the restaurant. Is there a problem here? Luca appeared beside their table like a shadow, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was dressed in all black tonight, and something about his demeanor made the entire restaurant seem to quiet down. The man at the bar looked up at Luca and immediately released Ka's wrist.
No problem, man.
Just talking to the waitress. The waitress has a name, Luca said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous undertone. And she's under my protection. I suggest you finish your drink and leave. Look, I don't want any trouble. Then don't cause any. Luca's hand moved to rest on Ka's lower back, a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Ka, are you all right? She nodded, still shaken by the encounter. The man at the bar threw some money on the table and left quickly, clearly recognizing that he was outmatched. Thank you, Ka said, turning to face Luca. I could have handled it, but you shouldn't have to. His dark eyes were still hard with anger. Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? No, I'm fine. Just shaken up. Luca's expression softened as he looked at her, and she could see the concern in his eyes. Come on, let me take you home. During the drive to her apartment, Ka found herself studying Luca's profile. The way he'd handled the situation at the restaurant, the quiet authority, the immediate response to protect her, had awakened something in her that she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. Luca, she said softly as he pulled up in front of her building.
Yes.
Can I ask you something personal? He turned to face her, giving her his full attention. Anything. Why me? I mean, you could have any woman you wanted. You're powerful, successful, attractive. She trailed off, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Luca was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Ka? She shook her head. I see strength. Real strength. Not the kind that comes from power or money, but the kind that comes from surviving loss and still choosing to be kind. I see intelligence and grace, and a heart that's big enough to take care of everyone around you. He reached over and gently touched her cheek. I see a woman who makes me want to be better than I am. The honesty in his words took her breath away. Without thinking, she leaned into his touch, and she saw his eyes darken with something that made her pulse quicken. Ka, he said, his voice rough. I need you to know what you're getting into with me. My world, but it's not safe. There are people who would hurt you just to get to me. I know what you are, she said quietly. And I know it should scare me. But when I'm with you, I feel safer than I have since my parents died. Something broke in Luca's expression, and he leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. You're going to be the death of me. You know that? Is that a bad thing? She whispered. Instead of answering, he kissed her. It was soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Come upstairs, she said, the words out before she could stop them. Luca's eyes searched her face. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. As they walked up to her apartment, Ka felt like she was crossing a line that would change everything. But for the first time in years, she was choosing something for herself, not out of obligation or necessity, but because she wanted it. Because she was falling in love with Luca Mancini. And despite all the reasons it was dangerous and complicated, she couldn't bring herself to care. The next morning, Ka woke up in Luca's arms, feeling more content than she had in years. Sunlight was streaming through her bedroom window, and she could hear her grandmother moving around in the kitchen. I should go, Luca said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. I don't want to make things complicated with your family. Too late for that, Ka said with a smile. Grandma Rose has probably already made you breakfast. Sure enough, when they emerged from the bedroom, they found Grandma Rose at the stove, humming to herself as she cooked. She took one look at them and smiled knowingly. You must be Luca, she said warmly.
Kaz told me so much about you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Evans, Luca replied, his natural charm evident as he kissed her hand in an old-fashioned gesture that made her giggle. Oh, I like this one, Grandma Rose said to Ka with a wink. He's got manners. As they sat around the small kitchen table sharing breakfast, Ka watched Luca interact with her grandmother with genuine warmth and respect. He asked about her health, complimented her cooking, and listened to her stories about Ka's childhood with obvious interest. When Marcus stumbled out of his bedroom, still half asleep, Luca greeted him like an old friend, asking about school and his plans for the future. Within minutes, Marcus was telling him about his dream of studying computer science, and Luca was offering to help him look at colleges, watching the man she was falling in love with seamlessly integrate into her family. Kala felt a happiness she hadn't experienced since before her parents died. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't carrying all the responsibility alone. But as perfect as the morning was, she knew that their relationship was about to face its biggest test. Because loving Luca Mancini meant entering a world where danger was always lurking, and she was about to discover just how far he would go to protect the people he loved. 6 months later, Ka stood in the kitchen of the new house Luca had bought for her family, a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood with a garden for Grandma Rose and a study for Marcus to do his homework. She was wearing a simple white dress and watching through the window as Luca taught Marcus how to change the oil in his car. The transition hadn't been without challenges. There had been difficult conversations about Luca's business, about the security measures that were now part of their daily life, about what it meant to be connected to the Mancini family. But through it all, Luca had been patient, honest, and completely devoted to her and her family's well-being. Grandma Rose appeared beside her at the window, following her gaze to where Luca was patiently explaining something to Marcus. That man loves you something fierce, she said with satisfaction. I know, Ka replied, unable to keep the smile off her face. And you love him back more than I ever thought possible. Good, Grandma Rose said firmly. Life's too short not to grab hold of love when it finds you, especially the kind that makes you stronger instead of smaller, as if he could feel her watching. Luca looked up and caught her eye through the window. The smile he gave her was soft and private, full of promises and possibilities. He said something to Marcus, who grinned and nodded, then started walking toward the house. Ka met him at the back door, and he pulled her into his arms without hesitation. What were you two talking about? She asked. I was asking his permission, Luca said, his dark eyes twinkling with mischief. Permission for what? Instead of answering, he dropped to one knee right there in her grandmother's kitchen, pulling out a ring box that made her heart stop. Kala Evans, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You walked into my restaurant as an employee and somehow became my everything. You've made me want to be the man you see when you look at me. Will you marry me? Through her tears, Ka could hear Grandma Rose cheering in the background and Marcus whooping with excitement, but all she could focus on was Luca, this powerful, dangerous, wonderful man who had chosen to love her and her family with everything he had. Yes, she whispered then louder. Yes, absolutely. Yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, Ka thought about how much her life had changed since that day, when he'd walked into the restaurant and heard Anderson humiliating her. She'd gone from feeling powerless and alone to being cherished and protected by a man who would move heaven and earth for her. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was better than anything she could have imagined. And as Luca held her close while her family celebrated around them, Ka knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected ways. This story of unexpected love and protection has come to an end. If it touched your heart and made you believe in the power of standing up for what's right, please leave a like and share it with someone who loves stories about finding love in unexpected places. New stories of romance, drama, and transformation are coming soon. Until next time, remember that love can find us when we least expect it and change everything in the most beautiful ways. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is important for me to continue creating content.